The gas station sat like a flickering lighthouse on the desolate stretch of Highway 70, 7 miles from the nearest town, casting a pale, artificial light into the night. Carla, weary from hours on the road, pulled her gray Toyota Camry to one of the pumps. Her playlist droned on, mindlessly repeating songs as her thoughts flickered back to the long, draining day behind her. The thought of grabbing a cold drink and filling up the tank was a small comfort, something to hold onto before the final leg of the drive home. She stepped out into the warmth of the night, the faint smell of diesel hanging in the air. The fluorescent lights above buzzed, throwing sharp shadows on the cracked pavement. Her purse settled on her shoulder as she began refueling, the mechanical rhythm of the pump a mindless distraction. Then, like a growl from the depths of the night, the rumble of motorcycle engines reached her ears. At first, she barely noticed, just another group passing through, she thought. But the sound grew louder, the vibration seemed to settle deep into her chest. Carla glanced up, feeling a sudden shift in the air. 6 bikers, their headlights slashing through the dark, rolled into the lot. The heavy thump of their engines shook the ground beneath her. They parked in unison, their black leather jackets adorned with patches Carla didn't recognize, each man marked with a presence that sent an uncomfortable chill up her spine. She stiffened slightly but refused to show it. Her hands tightened around the gas pump, though her face remained neutral. One of the men, tall with a scruffy beard and mirrored sunglasses, swung his leg off his bike. He muttered something to the group, and they all erupted in laughter. Carla didn't hear the words, but she felt the weight behind them, the intent carried in the deep, mocking tones of their amusement. She exhaled slowly, trying to center herself, focusing on finishing the task at hand. As the pump clicked off, she grabbed her drink and walked toward the small convenience store. She heard the unmistakable sound of heavy boots hitting pavement, and her heart quickened, but she didn't let it show. Her strides were steady, chin lifted high. Inside, the young cashier barely spared a glance, his attention glued to his phone. Carla felt the knot in her stomach tighten. Caution, she reminded herself. There was something about the biker's energy that felt off, sharper. She paid for the gas, trying to shake the unease creeping up her spine. When she stepped outside, they were still there. The tall one leaned lazily against his bike, arms crossed, his eyes following her every move. His friends flanked him, their postures loose but their gazes sharp. The air felt thick, charged. Carla's head stayed high, her pace unwavering as she walked toward her car. But each step seemed to stretch the distance between her and safety. She could feel their eyes drilling into her back, their murmurs, low, guttural, reaching her ears just as she approached her car. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them called, his voice smooth and mocking. Carla didn't turn around, didn't dignify him with a response. She kept walking, her fingers tight around the strap of her purse. Another one jeered, his laughter joining the chorus, but Carla refused to let it break her. She reached her car door, keys already in hand. She slid into the driver's seat, locking the door with a practiced flick of her thumb. A fleeting sense of relief washed over her, but it quickly evaporated when she glanced through the windshield. They were still standing there, watching her. Their expressions weren't just curious, they felt like a dare. As she started the engine, one of them stepped forward, boots crunching loudly against the gravel. He was smaller than the others but carried himself with an exaggerated swagger. His face twisted into a smirk that Carla instinctively recognized as dangerous. She didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eyes, her expression unreadable. "Were you headed in such a hurry, huh?" he taunted, slapping a heavy hand onto the hood of her car. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let him see it. She considered driving off, but something told her it would only make things worse. These men weren't looking for a peaceful encounter, they wanted a reaction. And Carla wasn't about to give it to them. The tall man with the scruffy beard strolled up next, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting her image back at her. He leaned against the driver's side door, forcing her to lower the window just a crack. "Didn't your mama teach you manners?" he drawled, his voice sweet with false politeness. "We're just being friendly." Carla's voice was steady, carrying an unspoken firmness. "I'm not looking for trouble. Just passing through." The tall man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Trouble?" he echoed, feigning surprise. "Now why would you think we'd cause trouble?" Behind him, his friends erupted in laughter again, the sound grating, like nails on a chalkboard. The tension in the air thickened, each laugh feeding the pressure building inside her. Carla's instincts screamed at her to stay calm. She had been in situations like this before, never quite as blunt, but always with the same sense of danger lurking just beneath the surface. His smile turned cold as he leaned in closer, his breath fogging the glass between them. "You don't belong here, lady. You know that, right?" The words hit her like a physical blow, but she didn't let it show. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white, yet her face remained composed, unflinching. Behind her, another biker approached the rear of the car, tapping lightly on the trunk as if testing her patience. It was a game to them, a cruel, calculated game. "Hey, maybe she needs directions," one of them sneered. "We could show her the quickest way out of town." The young cashier peeked out from behind the counter, glancing nervously at the scene before quickly ducking back out of sight. He was no help. Carla was on her own. But as the man at her window smirked, something inside Carla shifted. It wasn't just resolve, it was a flicker of defiance. She wasn't going to let them control this night. Her breath steady, she drew herself up, meeting the man's eyes without flinching. "You don't scare me," she said, her voice low but steady. For a moment, the laughter stopped. The night seemed to freeze in place. The man straightened, his expression darkening, the shift in the air unmistakable. His buddies exchanged uneasy glances, caught off guard by her calm. But it didn't last. The tension was shattered by one of them, a wiry man with a snake tattoo winding up his neck, breaking the silence with a sneer. "Big words, lady," he said. "Let's see if you can back them up." He stepped forward, but Carla was already moving. Before he could react, she slammed the window shut, locking it with a decisive click. Carla's eyes remained locked with the tall man, still leaning against her car. Her hand shifted, moving toward the gear shift with intent, and her voice cut through the tension. "I said," she repeated, her tone sharp, each word precise, "you don't scare me." The man's smirk faltered, uncertainty flickering behind the reflective lenses of his mirrored sunglasses. He took a step back, his bravado suddenly slipping. Carla seized the opportunity, her foot pressing the gas as the engine roared to life, its sound slicing through the thick silence of the night. But she didn't drive off. No, she held her ground, keeping the car still, her foot hovering over the brake. The bikers hesitated. Their swagger wavered in the face of her unwavering resolve. But just as one of them opened his mouth to speak, Carla did something that no one saw coming. She rolled down the window, just enough for her voice to pierce the air. "If you don't move," she said, the calm certainty in her voice impossible to ignore, "I will." But it wasn't just her words that held them in place, it was the power of her actions that shifted everything. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, the tall man no longer leaning against her car but standing a few feet away. His smirk had turned into a wary expression, his dominance suddenly questioned. The others remained behind him, waiting for his next move, but Carla wasn't waiting for anyone. She rolled her window down further, her movements deliberate, and then raised her phone for them to see. The screen was lit up with a number already dialed, 911. She didn't press call yet. Her eyes stayed locked on the tall man, her gaze unwavering. "You think this is a game?" she asked, her voice even and steady, each syllable cutting through the tension like a blade. "Keep testing me." For a moment, everything froze. The group of bikers stood still, their bravado crumbling. But then, the man with the snake tattoo barked a laugh, though it was forced and hollow. "You think the cops care about you out here?" Carla raised an eyebrow. "Guess we're about to find out." She wasn't bluffing, not entirely. She understood the game that was being played here, but she also knew she had to seize control. Her hand reached into her purse, and the faint metallic gleam of something caught the biker's attention. The tall man stiffened, his eyes narrowing. "Whoa, whoa," he said, his voice rising in uncertainty. "No need to get crazy." Carla tilted her head slightly, her calm demeanor unbroken. "Crazy? You came looking for trouble, remember? So here we are." She wasn't holding a weapon, but the reflection of the gas station's harsh lights off the object in her hand was enough to make them hesitate. Her pulse raced as she felt the balance of power begin to shift. They had relied on intimidation and numbers, but they hadn't anticipated someone standing their ground. The tall man took another step back, his eyes narrowing, but there was something new, respect, perhaps? "All right, lady. You've made your point." But Carla wasn't backing down. She opened her car door, stepping out into the night air, her presence expanding like a force. The bikers stood stunned into silence. She didn't flinch. She stood tall, her posture commanding, her gaze unwavering. "Let me tell you something," she said, her voice clear and deliberate. "People like you thrive on fear. You think you can scare someone like me into silence. But not tonight." The laughter had stopped. A few of the men shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between each other, as if searching for a way out. The tall man opened his mouth to retort, but Carla didn't let him speak. Her tone sharp and decisive, she cut him off. "You see this?" she said, holding up her phone. "It's recording everything you've said. Every move you've made. It's all on here. So go ahead. Give me a reason to hit send." The man's face darkened, but he didn't move closer. He knew the game had changed. Carla's unshakable calm had unraveled their facade, exposing them for what they were, cowards who relied on fear and numbers. Behind her, the faint sound of a car engine broke the silence, and all eyes turned toward the road. A pickup truck pulled into the gas station, an older couple stepping out, their gazes flitting nervously between Carla and the bikers. The presence of new witnesses drained the last remnants of bravado from the group. The tall man spat on the ground, his frustration barely contained. "Let's go," he barked at the others. "This ain't worth it." One by one, they climbed back onto their bikes, the rumble of their engines filling the air, slowly fading as they sped off into the night. Carla didn't move until the last of them disappeared into the distance. Only then did she release the breath she had been holding, her shoulders sinking in quiet relief. The older couple approached cautiously. "You all right, ma'am?" the man asked, his voice kind. Carla nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I am now. Thanks for stopping." As they lingered near her car, she climbed back inside, her hands trembling ever so slightly as they gripped the steering wheel. But there was something else swelling inside her, a sense of triumph. She had stood her ground, and she had won. But as Carla drove away, the adrenaline slowly faded, replaced by quiet reflection. The road ahead stretched endlessly before her, but her thoughts remained anchored in the night's events. She replayed the confrontation in her mind, her pulse still faintly elevated, but now there was no fear. Only resolve. She glanced at her phone, still resting on the passenger seat. The recording was still running, capturing every word, every action, every moment of the encounter. Carla stopped the recording and saved the file. Part of her wanted to delete it, to let the night fade into the rearview mirror. But another part of her, the part that had taken a stand, knew that this moment was bigger than just her. The bikers had retreated this time, but what about the next person they tried to intimidate? The thought burned in her chest. Carla wasn't the type to seek conflict, but tonight had shown her that sometimes silence wasn't an option. Maybe this recording could serve as evidence, or perhaps as a reminder of the strength it takes to stand tall when the odds seem stacked against you. The faint glow of the next town's lights appeared on the horizon, and Carla decided to pull over at a small diner. She parked her car, letting the hum of the engine subside, and stepped inside. The diner was nearly empty, save for a waitress behind the counter and an elderly man sipping coffee in a booth. The waitress greeted her warmly. "Rough night?" she asked, noticing the tension still lingering in Carla's shoulders. "You could say that," Carla replied with a small smile. She ordered a cup of tea and took a seat by the window, staring out into the quiet night. The confrontation had rattled her, but it had also reminded her of something she'd nearly forgotten, the power of courage. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a message from her younger sister, Denise. The text read, "Call me when you get home. Just wanted to check in on you." Carla smiled faintly, feeling a wave of gratitude. She typed back a quick reply, "Will do. Love you." She realized she hadn't told anyone about the bikers. Not her family, not the friends she usually confided in. Part of her wanted to keep it that way, but deep down, she knew this was a story worth sharing. Not for attention, but to remind people, especially women like her, that they didn't have to live in fear. Her thoughts were interrupted when the elderly man in the booth spoke up. "Miss," he said, his voice gravely but kind. "Saw you pull up. You all right?" Carla turned to him, surprised by his concern. "Yeah," she said, after a moment. "I am. Thanks." The man nodded, his gaze thoughtful. Sometimes the world will test you in ways you don't expect. But it's how you stand that tells the story. Carla's lips curled into a small smile. "You're right about that." As the man returned to his coffee, Carla felt a sense of calm settle over her. The events of the night still lingered, but they no longer weighed her down. Instead, they felt like proof of her resilience, a reminder that she was stronger than the circumstances she faced. But Carla knew that strength wasn't just about standing up for herself. It was about what came next, and the responsibility to use her experience to inspire others.